The sun hung low over the parched plains, casting long, burnt orange shadows across the dead grass that stretched beyond the eye. The wind blew dry and empty, carrying the scent of dust and horse dung. On the far edge of the town of Dry Creek past the hollow church and beyond the silence of the deserted track stood a broken-down farmhouse with peeling white paint and a porch that groaned every time someone walked across it. Behind it, beyond the barn and the chicken pens, lay a tool shed. It wasn't much, just a tilted box of rotting planks with a rusted latch and a cracked window covered in years of grime. But inside that shed, curled in the corner on a bed of straw and a torn wool blanket, was a girl, thin as a fence post,
bruised as old fruit.
Her name was Lila Mae. 17, or close to it. She wasn't sure anymore. She didn't have birthdays, or cake, or laughter. Her ribs stuck out through the threadbare dress she'd outgrown years ago, and her pale feet were cracked from walking. Barefoot through gravel and dirt. She pressed a cloth wet with rainwater caught in a rusty tin against her forehead. Her breathing was shallow. Her chest ached every time she coughed. She was sure something was wrong with her lungs, had been for years. But every time she tried to rest, to whisper how bad it was, someone shouted at her, called her names, pulled her by the wrist until her arm went numb. Lazy, they called her. Dramatic, liar, too pretty to be useful, too useless to be loved. Her mother had died of the same illness, that hollow, wheezing, slow kind of sickness that creeps in and doesn't let go. Her father, unable to bear the loss, drank himself into a shallow grave. Then came her mother's cousin Marlene, who offered to take her in. Lila had packed her tiny sack with a ribbon and a photo and thought, maybe this was her second chance. It wasn't. Marlene's husband, Jeb, was a tall man with fists like cast iron and a voice that made the dogs flinch. They didn't see Lila as a child, they saw her as extra labor. Someone to wash the blood off the floor when Jeb brought back deer, someone to haul feed, scrub pans, clean shoes, catch chickens, and carry buckets nearly as heavy as she was. Her coughing got worse. Jeb beat her harder, accusing her of pretending just to get out of chores. "Ain't nothing wrong with ya," he'd shout, boot heels echoing on wood. "You think life owes you something just 'cause your mama up and died?" That morning, like many before, she had collapsed on the path carrying a sack of oats. Jeb had thrown a pail at her. Marlene didn't blink. The kids, her cousins, watched with blank eyes and never said a word. No one ever did. So now she lay there under the low tin roof, her body aching. She didn't cry anymore. She'd forgotten how to. The tears had dried up weeks ago, replaced by quiet, slow breaths and the soft hum of songs her mama used to sing. She clutched a piece of torn cloth that once belonged to her. A final thread between then and now. And then on that blistering morning when the sky seemed to melt into the ground, she heard it. The sound of hooves, steady, strong, coming down the road. She lifted her head slowly, pain shooting up her neck, peered through the crack in the wood. A horse, dark brown, well-kept, quiet, approached the gate. On it rode a man, wide-brimmed, hat, long coat, dust trailing behind him like smoke. He didn't ride like a rancher or a sheriff. He rode like someone who didn't mind being alone. He stopped outside the house, swinging down from the saddle with ease, tall, square shoulders. Moved slow, like the world didn't rush him. He knocked on the porch post, not the door. That told her something. Marlene answered, loud voice. Fake smile. "Can I help you, mister? I'm heading west. Wondering if there's a well I could draw from." The cowboy's voice was deep, calm, southern but not rough, like molasses over gravel. Lila strained to hear more, her ears attuned like a mouse in a hawk's shadow. She saw him look around, not nosy, observant. His eyes scanned the house, the barn, and finally, The shed. Her heart stopped when their eyes met through the crack. She pulled back instinctively, breath caught in her throat, but not before she saw the flicker in his eyes. Not disgust. Not curiosity. Concern. That alone made her chest tighten, not out of fear, but because no one had looked at her like that in so long. She forgot what it felt like. He didn't say anything to Marlene, just nodded when she pointed toward the well. But as he passed by the shed, he slowed. She could hear his boots in the dirt. She dared to look again. He paused at the side of the shed, reached into his saddlebag, took out a red apple, and placed it gently beside the stone wall near where she sat. Then he tipped his hat at the shadow behind the plank at her and walked back to his horse. He didn't look back, didn't say her name, didn't ask what was wrong, but Lila May didn't move for a long time after he was gone. She just stared at that apple. Round, red, real. Something about it made her eyes well up. And for the first time in weeks, her body, shaking and heart aching, Lila allowed herself to whisper one word. Please. She wasn't sure what she was asking for, but she knew this. Something had shifted. Someone had noticed. And that meant maybe, just maybe, not all men rode away. The wind had a sharpness to it that morning, slicing through even the thickest coats and rustling the grass into murmured secrets. Dust swirled in ghostly circles across the dry ground as B.O. Carter rode away from that cracked farmhouse with a strange heaviness in his chest. He didn't often let things linger, but something about those eyes behind the shed wouldn't leave his mind. He didn't see much, just a sliver of a face through warped wood. Pale skin, sunken cheeks, hair the color of wheat left too long in the sun. But her eyes gray as storm clouds met his, like she hadn't seen a kind face in years. B.O. hadn't come to Dry Creek looking for anything more than supplies and water. He was a man used to keeping his distance, from towns, from people, from pain. That's what you learn to do when loss lives in your bones. That's what you become when grief settles into your shadow. B.O. Carter had once had a home. A little ranch house on the edge of Prairie Hill, where wildflowers danced in the wind, and his baby sister Nell used to braid ribbons into the horse's mane while singing made-up songs. Their mama had died young. Their daddy never stayed sober long enough to raise them right. But B.O. raised Nell like she was his own, until she got sick. Same slow sickness that stole breath in the night and drained color from her cheeks. He'd sold his best colt to pay for a doctor, then his saddle, then finally the land. But none of it mattered. By the time spring came, Nell was gone, and B.O. never forgave himself for being too late. Since then, he never stayed anywhere too long. No town ever really felt like home. He kept his horse, whiskey, his hat, and a few tools. Worked odd jobs, helped mend fences, break horses, herd cattle. Always quiet, always kind, but never close. He preferred it that way. Until that morning. Until her. The next day, B.O. came back down the road, not to talk, not to interfere, just to pass by. That's what he told himself. Just making sure his route still ran clean toward the canyon. But when he neared the same weather-beaten property, something in his chest clenched. He slowed whiskey to a walk, letting the reins go slack. His eyes scanned the fence line, the porch, the shed. Nothing. No movement. No sign of her. He reached into his saddlebag and pulled out another apple. This time, he didn't stop. He rode past, slow, and tossed the apple gently toward the well, just in case she was watching, and she was. Lila crouched low behind the chicken coop that morning, pretending to scatter feed while her arms shook from weakness. Her head was pounding. Her knees were scraped from a fall. Jeb had slapped her across the face the night before for spilling oil on the porch. She wasn't even sure how it had happened. The world had tilted, and she was on the ground before she could catch herself. But she saw him, the same tall cowboy, Brown coat, quiet gaze. He didn't even glance toward her this time, but he slowed, and that meant something. When he left the apple behind, her breath caught. He remembered. That evening, B.O. sat alone by a small fire near the river bend outside. Town. He chewed on jerky, watching the stars blink into the dusk. Whiskey grazed nearby, snorting softly. The fire cracked once, then settled. B.O. exhaled and ran a hand through his beard. What the hell am I doing? He muttered. He hadn't eaten apples in months. He'd bought a whole sack in town that morning without thinking. His boots were dusty, his back sore from riding, but his mind was stuck on the girl with bruises and hollow eyes. He wasn't a hero. Never had been. But he knew what it looked like when someone was being hurt and no one gave a damn. And he knew what it cost to look away. The following day, B.O. took a side route and stopped near the barn. He didn't go to the door this time. He leaned against the fence, his arms crossed, watching chickens peck and scratch. Then he saw her, only for a second, carrying a heavy pail toward the smokehouse. Her steps were uneven, her back hunched. And then, as if her legs gave way, she collapsed into the dirt. The bucket spilled. Chickens scattered. B.O. was off his horse before he realized it. He jogged up the path, calling gently, "Miss, you all right?" She tried to get up, but her hands slipped. Her dress caught in the mud. Her breath came in wheezes. From the porch, a voice bellowed, "You best back off, stranger." Jeb stomped down the steps with a shotgun resting across his arms. His face was red with anger. Marlene stood behind him, arms crossed, watching like a vulture. B.O. stood his ground, one hand resting near his belt, but not moving. "She don't look all right," he said, voice calm but firm. "She's just lazy," Jeb spat. "Ain't nothing wrong with her that a day's work won't fix." B.O. looked back at Lila. She was trying to sit up now, shame burning on her face, a cut bleeding near her temple. "She needs a doctor," B.O. said flatly. "She needs to learn not to lie around like a damn stray." Marlene snorted. "You gonna pay her hospital bill, mister? You don't know her. She's not your problem." That line hit harder than they knew. B.O. clenched his jaw. "No," he said, voice low. "She ain't my problem." He turned to Lila, kneeling down as Jeb shouted. More words behind him. B.O. didn't speak. He simply reached into his pocket and left a cloth with some salve and a biscuit in her lap. Then he looked her straight in the eyes, quiet, serious. "I see you." And then he left. That night, back in the shed, Lila held the biscuit in both hands like it was gold. She hadn't eaten real food in days. She didn't know what the salve was, but she rubbed it gently over her bruises and winced. The wind howled outside. The shed creaked, but in her chest, something had changed. Someone had seen her fall and didn't laugh. Someone had looked past the dirt, the weakness, the shame, and saw her. She didn't know his name, but she repeated his words over and over in the dark, like a prayer. "I see you." Meanwhile, B.O. sat beside his fire again, hat low over his eyes, boots stretched toward the flame. He still didn't know what he was going to do, but he knew what he couldn't do. He couldn't ride away this time, not when someone was coughing up blood behind a shed, being told it was all in her head. Not when a ghost of a girl reminded him so much of his sister. Not when he'd learned the hard way what happened when no one showed up. The sun had barely begun to rise when Lila May opened her eyes. Her bones ached. Her throat burned. The skin along her ribs felt like it had been scraped raw. But something inside her was different this morning. Not better. Not healed. But alive. She clutched the now empty biscuit cloth in her hands, pressing it to her lips like a secret. And that word, the cowboy's words, "I see you." They still echoed in her chest like the soft beat of a drum she thought had stopped long ago. No one had ever said that before. Not since her mother died. Not since her father stopped looking at her with anything but numb eyes. And certainly not here. Here, she was invisible. Or worse, visible only as a burden. Her whole life, sickness had meant weakness. Weakness meant punishment. But what if, maybe, what if the problem wasn't her body? What if the real disease in this house was something they carried? Inside the main house, the air smelled like burnt grease and sour milk. Jeb was already shouting at the boys about chores, and Marlene was thumping the old coffee pot on the stove like it owed her something. Lila walked in with her head bowed, hands clenched behind her back. "'Bout time you got up," Marlene muttered, not looking at her. "Chickens ain't fed themselves." Jeb barely glanced up. "You drop another bucket today, I swear." "I'll clean it," Lila said softly. They didn't thank her, didn't acknowledge her beyond a scoff. They rarely did, but she heard something else now, beneath their noise, a silence between their words. A fear, a crack. She'd seen it yesterday dot in Jeb's eyes when the cowboy stepped up, in Marlene's voice when she called him stranger. For once they didn't have the power, not all of it, and that was new. That afternoon, as the sun rose to its highest and the heat turned thick and cruel, Lila's cough returned. Her breath came in fits and sharp stabs. Her head spun with every step. Still, she pushed through. She lifted the bucket slower now, not from weakness but awareness. Every step was survival. Every movement deliberate. She was waiting. For him, B.O. Carter hadn't slept well. All night, he tossed under the stars, watching the moon crawl across the sky like it was dragging something heavy with it. He kept hearing her wheeze, kept seeing the mud on her dress. The blood at her temple. It wasn't right. It wasn't just, and he was tired of doing nothing. By mid-morning, he was back on the same road, pretending to ride casual. But when he saw the barn, his grip tightened on the reins. This time, he didn't approach the porch. He dismounted, walked right to the fence, and waited. Lila saw him from the corner of her eye and froze. He didn't call her. He didn't ask her to come over. He just leaned on the post and nodded. His hat shaded most of his face, but she could feel the kindness in it. She walked over slowly, one hand pressed to her side, the other gripping a broom. "You all right?" he asked, voice like gravel softened with honey. She tried to nod, but the tears built too fast. "No," she whispered. "I'm not." B.O. swallowed. "You sick?" he asked gently. Lila looked around, then back at him. "Been sick a long time. Ain't nobody ever believed me." He didn't hesitate. "I do." She blinked hard. Her lips trembled. "I don't got no money," she said quickly. "I can't pay for help. I didn't ask for payment." B.O. glanced toward the house. The windows were dark, but he knew eyes were behind them. "Can you ride?" he asked. Lila looked at the horse behind him, tall, strong, steady. She shook her head. "Don't know how. I could help you up. Take you to a DOC in town." She pulled back, panicked now. "They'd come after me. Say I ran off. Say I stole something." "You ain't a thief," B.O. said. "But I ain't free either." She whispered. B.O. looked at her long and hard. Then, quieter than before, "Would you leave if you could?" Silence. Then a nod. That night, Jeb was drunk. His voice thundered through the house like rolling clouds before a storm. He yelled about fences, about money, about that goddamn cowboy sniffing around like a mutt. Lila hid in the shed again, pressing her hands to her ears. But then she remembered something, her mother's words. Once, when she was very young and had a fever, her mama sat beside her and whispered, "If they don't treat you like someone to love, you don't owe them anything, baby. Not even your silence." And just like that, she stood up. Next morning, B.O. stood near the general store, sipping coffee, when he saw someone approach. A woman, thin, pale, wrapped in a rough shawl. It was her. Lila. She was shaking, but standing. I can't stay, she said, voice hoarse. I don't know where to go, but I can't stay there. Bo nodded slowly. You don't have to go back, he said. And then he lifted her gently onto Whiskey, one hand steady at her back. She clung to the saddle horn, coughing. But she didn't look back. Bo mounted behind her, the horse shifting under their combined weight. Where are we going? She asked weakly. Someplace quiet. Safe, he said. She nodded once, then laid her head against his chest as they rode. For the first time in her life, the road ahead didn't feel like an escape. It felt like a beginning. The clouds had been gathering all day, big and heavy and mean-looking. The kind of clouds that didn't just threaten the storm. They'd promised one. Bo. Carter glanced at the sky as he rode. The girl pressed gently in front of him. His arms circled her, not tightly, not possessively, just enough. Enough to let her know she wouldn't fall. Enough to keep her steady as the horse moved in slow, deliberate steps through the wild, open trail that carved through the plains like an old scar. He had no destination. Not yet, but he had a plan. Keep moving. Keep her safe. Keep her breathing. Lila didn't talk much after they left town. The wind tugged at her shawl and her breath came in shallow puffs. But every now and then she'd shift her weight, just enough to lean against him, just enough to remind him she was still holding on. Bo wasn't a man used to being held on to. Not in years, but it didn't scare him. By late afternoon, the air changed. Wind picked up. The light dimmed. And then the first drop hit the brim of his hat. Then another. And another. Until the sky cracked open with a sound like the earth splitting in two. Rain poured down fast, cold, merciless. The wind howled. Thunder rolled across the land like a growl from the heavens. Lila flinched, her thin arms wrapping around herself. Bo muttered something under his breath and steered the horse toward the tree line. There's an old shelter near the creek, he said, more to himself than her. Cabin still a good half day off, but the barn's closer. The rain beat down harder, soaking their coats, turning the dirt into thick sucking mud. But Bo kept them moving. Eyes sharp, jaw clenched. He could feel her trembling. He didn't say much. He just kept whispering, almost there. The barn came into view just as the wind bent the trees sideways. It stood crooked and half-rotten, but to Bo, it was a miracle. He helped her down first, guiding her inside with one arm while tying. Off the horse with the other. Inside, it smelled of old hay, dust, and forgotten animals. The roof leaked in places, but the loft was dry enough. Bo found a few crates and an old saddle to prop against the wall. It wasn't much, but it was shelter. And it was theirs for the night. He built a small fire and a rusted trough, using dried kindling from his saddle pack. The flickering light cast long shadows over Lila's face as she sat, knees drawn up, wrapped in his old blanket. Her skin was pale. Her lips had turned a worrying shade of blue. She was wheezing again, shallow breaths, each one sounding like it had to fight its way free. Bo crouched beside her. You're not all right, he said gently. She tried to shake her head. I'll be fine, she rasped. He didn't believe it. And he didn't pretend to. He pulled off his coat and draped it around her. Then he opened his canteen and poured a little into a tin cup, holding it out to her. Drink slow. She obeyed, her hands barely steady. Bo sat beside her and removed his hat, letting the firelight hit his face for the first time. He wasn't handsome in the polished way city folks liked. His features were carved from work and wind. But there was kindness in his eyes, and something else, guilt, maybe. A weight too old for its years. She watched him for a moment, then whispered, You don't even know me. I don't need to, he replied. Silence. Then her voice, smaller than ever. Why are you helping me? He looked into the fire for a long time before answering. My sister, Nell. She got sick. Real bad. I didn't get her help fast enough. I waited too long." His voice cracked not from tears, but from the effort it took not to let them come. "She used to sing all the time," he said, "even when she was coughing so hard she couldn't stand. She never stopped smiling." He paused. "You remind me of her." Lila looked down. "I don't smile much," she whispered. "You will," he said simply. She said nothing, but her body leaned closer to his, not because she was cold, not because she was afraid, but because, for the first time in her life, she felt safe. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside that broken-down barn, a girl who had been invisible and voiceless and beaten into silence was wrapped in warmth, in kindness, in something she'd never known before. Hope. Later that night, B.O. sat against a beam, watching her sleep. Her breathing still rattled, but it was steady, softer. He knew she needed a doctor, food, a bed, a real home. He didn't have much, but what he did have, she could share. He had land, quiet land, a small cabin out near the canyon, where no one came knocking. He'd built it himself after Nell passed, never meaning to live in it. But he went there when things got too loud, too heavy. It was time to go back. Not alone this time. As dawn broke, the rain slowed to a whisper. Birds stirred in the trees. And B.O., with a steady hand, tucked a piece of dry bread into Lila's coat pocket and whispered, "Come morning, we ride home." The world looked different in the morning light. The storm had passed. It left behind glistening puddles, trembling leaves, and skies so blue it almost hurt to look at them. The barn, crooked and creaking, felt softer in the hush of dawn. Inside, the fire had gone out, but warmth lingered not from the flames, but from something harder to define. Lila stirred beneath the coat, her thin fingers clutching the frayed edge like it anchored her to something real. She opened her eyes and blinked at the way the sun filtered in through broken wood panels, gentle light, not the harsh kind she was used to. She wasn't sure where she was for a moment, but then she saw B.O. sitting by the barn doors, sharpening a small blade with calm, quiet movements. His horse grazed outside, and the sounds of morning were simple birds, hooves, breathing. No yelling, no slamming doors, no footsteps rushing toward her with fists or insults, just peace. And peace to Lila May felt more terrifying than pain, because it was foreign, and maybe too fragile to be real. B.O. looked over his shoulder, saw her awake, and gave a slow nod. "Mornin'," she nodded back. "How are you feelin'?" "Like I got kicked by a horse." "But softer," she whispered. He smiled just barely, but it was real. They packed what little they had and rode in silence. B.O. kept one hand near her on the reins, guiding the horse gently, making sure every bump in the road didn't jostle her too hard. She coughed a few times deep, chesty, but not as bad as the day before. Still, Beau's jaw tightened every time he heard it. Around midday, the trees began to thin and the land changed wider now, wilder. A valley opened up ahead, golden with tall grass and edged with old cottonwoods swaying in the breeze. At the far edge, near a line of hills, stood a small cabin, simple, square, made of pine logs and stone, with a crooked chimney and a faded porch swing. Lila stared. "This yours?" she asked. B.O. nodded. "Built it after Nell passed. Never really used it much." She blinked at that. "You built it yourself?" He shrugged. "Didn't have anyone else to do it." There was a long pause before she said, softly, "It's beautiful." Number. One had ever said that word in her presence before, not for anything she was part of, not for any place she'd ever been. The inside of the cabin smelled like cedar and dust. It had only one room, but it felt wide with space and old stove in the corner, a cot against the wall, shelves filled with tools and books and jars of dried herbs. Everything was tidy, simple. Lived in, but not crowded. B.O. showed her the wash basin, gave her space to clean up, and set about heating a small pot of broth. When she came out, her face washed and her hair loosely braided, he stopped stirring. A moment, he didn't say anything. Just handed her the bowl. She sat by the window and drank slow, spoon by spoon. Her throat burned with every swallow, but she didn't stop. Over the next few days, time began to slow. Lila slept. A lot. Her body needed it. She didn't dream much. Or maybe she did, but for the first time in her life, the dreams didn't feel like escapes. They felt like gentle waves pulling her to safety. Bio never asked for anything. He brought her water, left her bread, stayed quiet. Sometimes he sat on the porch reading or carving small shapes out of wood. Sometimes he worked outside repairing fence posts or chopping wood. Always nearby, never hovering. She didn't know how to say it, but his silence spoke safety. After 4 days, she sat beside him on the porch. They watched the sun sink behind the hills, staining the sky with deep amber and violet. Back home, she said softly, "They used to call me a ghost." Bio glanced at her. "I can see why," he replied. She tensed until he added, "But not because you're gone. Because you were trapped in a place that tried to kill your spirit." She turned. To him, eyes glassy. He looked at her gently. "You ain't a ghost, Lila. You're still here." Her lip quivered. She turned away, wiping her face before the tears could fall. "I don't know how to be anything else," she whispered. "You don't gotta figure it out today," he said. "You just gotta keep waking up." A few days later, Miss Hattie came by. An old nurse who lived a few miles downriver. Bio had sent word with a ranch boy he trusted, asking if she could come by for a girl who needed looking at. Hattie examined Lila gently, asked questions Bio had never thought to ask, and then sighed, loud enough for them both to hear. "She's got inflammation in the lungs," she said. "Might be chronic, might not. But what she needs more than medicine is rest, food, and air that don't choke her to death." Bio nodded. "She's got all three here," Hattie smiled. "Good. Then she's got a fighting chance." Before leaving, the old woman placed a hand on Lila's cheek. "Don't let what they did to you become who you are, sweetheart." Lila broke then. Not in loud sobs. Just quiet tears that slipped past her defenses and dripped into her lap. Bo didn't speak. He just sat beside her, hand resting near hers, palm open, waiting. Eventually, her fingers curled into his. In the weeks that followed, she got stronger. She could walk without wobbling. She helped boil water and sweep floors. She laughed just once when a bird flew straight into the window and shook it off like a drunk farmer. Bo turned at the sound of her laugh, startled like it was thunder. But then he smiled, wide, full. It was the first time Lila saw what he looked like without the sadness. One day, she found Nell's old scarf in a drawer. She didn't ask if she could wear it. She just did. Bo saw it around her neck, blinked slow, and nodded. "Looks better on you than it ever did on me," he said. She smiled, not shyly. Not broken, but like someone finally becoming something. Healing wasn't fast. It wasn't perfect. She still coughed some nights, still flinched when doors slammed, still sometimes forgot that no one was going to hurt her if she spilled water or dropped a spoon. But day by day, step by step, she was changing. The bruises faded, her strength returned, and in her reflection faint in the wash basin water she saw something she hadn't seen since she was a child: life. The cold winds of early spring began to sweep across the plains. The land was starting to wake again, buds on trees, birds nesting, the creek trickling louder from melted snow. Bo's land smelled like new earth and pine bark, and inside the cabin, it smelled like soup, wood smoke, and clean cotton. And hope. But Lila May had never known what to do with hope, because hope had always been followed by punishment. By men yelling, "Don't get comfortable." by someone yanking the rug out from beneath her the moment she dared to smile. So when she found herself smiling too easily now, it scared her. She had started walking to the edge of the valley each morning just to breathe. Bio let her. Always. Kept an eye, but never followed. He trusted her freedom like a wild horse trusts the wind, cautiously, but reverently. One morning, she didn't return right away. Bo noticed. His coffee cooled in his hand as he stood in the doorway, staring out into the valley. He waited. An hour passed. Then another. Finally, he saddled his horse. He found her sitting beneath a sycamore, arms around her knees, staring up at the clouds. Like they might speak to her. He dismounted quietly. She didn't look at him. Wasn't running, she said softly. Not this time. I didn't think you were. She looked at him then. Then why'd you come? He gave the softest reply. Because I care where you are. She closed her eyes and let a tear slip free. It's still hard. I still feel them sometimes, those voices, those hands. Like they're gonna reach out of the shadows and grab me back. He knelt beside her. They won't. I won't let him. She studied his face, sun-worn, weathered, honest. No one's ever said that to me, she whispered. He placed a hand over hers. Then no one ever meant to keep you. That night, Bo couldn't sleep. He sat on the porch, whittling wood like he always did when his mind was too loud. He kept shaping the same piece into a little bird, carved wings, a small beak, tiny feet. Then he smoothed the edges again and again. Lila came out and sat beside him, wrapped in a shawl, face lit by starlight. They sat in silence. Finally, she spoke. You still dream of Nell? He blinked slowly, nodded. She was my heart, he said, but not my only one. Lila didn't look at him. I'm not trying to replace her, she whispered. Bo turned to her then, and he said something that made the air shift. You ain't replacing anything. You're making something new. Weeks turned to a month. And in that time, something subtle changed. Lila began humming. While cooking, she braided flowers into her hair sometimes. She laughed at Bo's awful jokes, even the ones that made no sense, especially those. And Bo. He started whistling when he fed the horses. He stopped talking to ghosts. He built her a garden bed near the porch. Said it might be too early in the season, but if anyone could grow something out of hard soil, it was her. She planted onions and thyme, but healing isn't always a straight line. One morning, a stranger rode into the valley. Lila froze at the window when she saw the man, tall, coat, dusty face shadowed by his hat. Bo met him halfway, hat low, hand near his holster. He wasn't taking chances. Lila's hands trembled. The man asked for directions to Junction City. Nothing more, polite, respectful. But for Lila, it didn't matter. She was shaking for hours. Afterward, Bo didn't push. He just sat with her. Every time I think I'm stronger, she murmured. Something reminds me I'm not. Bo reached for her hand. You don't gotta be unbreakable to be strong. Spring bled into early summer. Lila's health had stabilized. Her lungs were stronger. Her appetite returned. Her smile came easier. One evening, she stood in the doorway, watching Bo as he tied a rope line for drying herbs. She held something in her hands, the little wooden bird he had carved. She'd painted it, not with store-bought paint, but with wildflowers and crushed berries. She'd made it blue like the sky the first day he brought her home. A speckled breast, brown eyes. She handed it to him. He looked at it for a long time, and then, just barely above a whisper, Lila. May, I know I ain't much. I ain't got land that's fancy or words that flow pretty. But this place, it's yours now. If you want it, if you want me. Her eyes filled. She didn't need to ask what he meant. She already knew. She looked. Around at the hills, the flowers, the roof over her head. The silence that had become comfort instead of terror to him. Standing there like a man who would wait a lifetime for her to say yes. She nodded. I don't want fancy, she whispered. I want safe, I want steady, I want you. They didn't have a big wedding, just Miss Hattie, 2 ranch hands, and the birds. But when she stood in Beau's coat, her hair braided with wild daisies, and he took her hand on that porch where they'd once sat in silence, it felt like church, like forgiveness, like everything that had once broken was now gently, carefully, whole again. The past never disappeared, but in Beau's arms, in the warmth of a quiet kitchen, in the soft hum of a garden breeze, Lila Mae finally found something she'd never known before, a life that didn't hurt, a place to be exactly who she was, a love that didn't demand anything, only gave, and for a girl who once flinched at every sound and shadow. That kind of love felt like the greatest miracle of all. The end,